We've been actually fighting this since 1999 when the area was first amalgamated. As I said, we were from Bobcaygeon, Fountain Falls. It's now the city of Kawartha Lakes. So we have the biggest city probably in Canada by area. But it's 72,000 people, but more cows than people. But we're still a city. The provincial Tories amalgamated us. We fought before that. They sent in a commissioner. They just forced the amalgamation. We fought it. We asked for a referendum to get out of it. Before he was elected, Dalton McGuinty promised us a binding referendum on de-amalgamation. So we actually, Chris Hodgson finally came. He was the Minister of Municipal Affairs then, came to our council and announced that he would give us a referendum. So we've got the referendum. We fought it. We had a yes side and a no side. And the yes side won the referendum. We actually voted to de-amalgamate. And that was 3 years ago. Dalton McGuinty has now reneged on his promise, and he actually sent the Minister of Municipal Affairs, who is John Gerritsen, to our council to say no, they weren't going to recognize the amalgamation.
In Victoria County, they had a referendum. They wanted to de-amalgamate. McGuinty, when he was in opposition, said, we will respect referendums. He got into power?
He lied!
And he lied.
The casket is painted a brilliant liberal red, and it has signs on it that say Democracy McGuinty Style, and here lies McGuinty. Forced amalgamations are an assault on rural Ontario, and it has to stop. And where there is a local demand to restore democratic local governments, it has to happen. And where, in our case, there has been an actual democratic provincial referendum, the Ontario government has to actually count the ballots and abide by the outcome of the vote. The Premier has to stop lying and start keeping his promises.
This is City of Ottawa. If you look out, you can see one street light. That's because my mom works for Ontario Hydro and she got us a street light. And it's sitting on a pole out in the barnyard. Our service would be garbage pickup and snow removal. They don't maintain the roads, and it's not hard to tell when you drive down them. We get no buses. They don't cut the ditch, which is something they should do in high deer car collision corridors. We're not City of Ottawa here, and we got to get out of it.
The amalgamation was the worst thing that ever happened to us.
Why do you say that?
Well, because all of a sudden a lot of rules and regulations for the city are being imposed on the rural areas. Burning, shooting, regulations over eggs and sawdust and maple trees and everything. It's crazy. We're trying to make a living here.
What's wrong with Ottawa for rural people is pretty obvious. It's been pretty well defined here today. It's been pretty well defined for a long time. We've had only 4.5 years of the new city. A lot of us felt it was a mistake and poorly designed in the beginning. I think time has proven that is correct. You can't mix urban and rural. It has failed. We're over-regulated. The official plan views us as owners of green space. Increasingly, the official plan is going to restrict how and where we can use our land, such as the people in Stittsville with their wetlands. The city is spending money hand over fist. They spend $100 million more every year than they take in. The reserves currently are $37 million. When the city started 4.5 years ago, it was $400 million. That was reserves from the rural townships and responsible communities like Nepean and Canada and several other communities that were sucked into the black hole of Ottawa. And we get more regulations and more restrictions and less freedom and less services.
Out of 17,000 city employees, there isn't one city employee or even a consultant that the city has hired that specializes in agricultural or rural affairs. The city chose in budget cuts to cut only one committee, and that was the Agriculture and Rural Affairs Advisory Committee. We started the Rural Council to offer ourselves as a resource for the city to say there are some problems. Unfortunately, the city has not seen fit to come to us in the forming of bylaws or any other policy decisions or planning decisions that have come down the pike.
And if we continue to leave decision-making in a handful of very sincere and well-meaning politicians and a handful of some very learned planners in the building behind me and some other municipal buildings around the city, there is nowhere to go but down. The greatest strength when it comes to rural issues, the greatest strength when it comes to decision making lies outside of the hub of Ottawa. It lies with the experience and the knowledge of the families that have lived for many, many generations in their hamlets, in their villages, in their communities, that are ready to contribute, that are ready to come forward with the solutions. So, what's the solution? We have to be able to govern ourselves. They're not willing to let us do that. That just means we have to work a little harder to achieve that end. I do believe that Carleton County, as we used to have some 30 years ago, even before the regional municipality, would be a perfect model of how to have good government, how to provide what we need and deserve, and what we need to go out and get. To me, I think this sounds pretty wonderful. This is the percentage of respondents supporting the recreation of independent rural municipalities. 90%. 90%.
On the way out here tonight, I'm just waiting for bylaw. I saw some cats not on a leash. You've been treated with utter contempt and disrespect by this mayor and this council, and quite frankly, it's embarrassing. You have had your representation go from 5 wards to 3 wards. You now have 3 councillors out of 23. Before you had 5 out of 21. So that's a nice way to start the Rural Summit. They've just reduced you to 3 councillors. After 1 year of myself being mayor, if you're not happy, guess what? I will promise. And when I say I promise, I will keep my promise. I will work and we will conduct a binding referendum for the 4 former townships. There will be a binding plebiscite referendum to see if you would like to form Carleton County or stay with Ottawa, because I believe it should be decided by the people, not the politicians.
I'm a resident of Canada, and I didn't like the idea of amalgamating Canada with the city of Ottawa. Nobody ever asked me, and in fact, if I recall, it was the Harris Conservatives that did that. And you're going to have to convince a lot of politicians at the provincial level, both Conservatives and Liberals, to support this cause.
Yeah, you got to remember, just in this ward, if I remember correctly, we send about $2 million a year in social services payments as part of our taxes, more than we get back. Okay, so if you were on your own, that's $2 million you'd be spending in your community.